bodies, the UGC, the reports brought out by the Secondary Education Commission and the University Education Commission, and several other such landmarks mark his tenure from 1947 to 1958. The relevance of his views, even after several decades, is apparent from the National Education Policy 2020, its vision of education as the means for nation building, and the significance of the first stage of education, which is the foundational stage. Today, our deliberations will focus on education during the foundational stage. The recent National Curriculum Framework on the foundational stage will provide the perspective and also inform the discussions. But before we begin the sessions, I request Professor Venkateshwaralu, the Director in charge of School of Education, to welcome the dignitaries and guests. Professor Venkateshwaralu, please.
Thank you, Professor Sutapa. Good morning. On behalf of School of Education, I extend warm welcome to all of you on this occasion as we celebrate the National Education Day on the birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, the first Education Minister of Independent India. We are also glad that our Honorable Vice Chancellor is here with us to grace the occasion. We are also glad to have Professor Vinita Kaul, Emeritus Professor, Ms. Deepa Shankar, Chief of Education, UNICEF Dhaka, and Dr. Monimalika De, Director Center for Early Childhood Education and Development, School of Education Studies, Dr. Ambedkar University, New Delhi, for accepting our invitation to share their experiences on this occasion. We are thankful to our Vice Chancellors for their support in organizing this program. We are also thankful to all the directors, regional directors, heads of divisions, and centers who are present on this occasion. I am also thankful to faculty members, staff, research scholars of School of Education. National Education Day is an annual observance to commemorate the birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. The day is an occasion to remember Maulana Azad's contribution in laying the foundations of education system in independent India, and to evaluate and improve the country's current performance in the field of education. Maulana Azad believed that one of the surest ways of securing international peace is fundamental education for the people across the globe. On this day, we thought it is appropriate to deliberate upon the issues of current importance, that is the recent National Curriculum Framework for Foundation Stage brought out by NCERT based on the recommendations of New Education Policy 2020. The foundational stage envisions an integrated approach to early childhood care and education for children between ages 3 to 8. The transformative nature of this phase of education is expected to qualitatively improve the contents and outcomes of education, thereby impacting the lives of our children towards a better future. The goal is to achieve foundational literacy and numeracy as articulated in the new education policy. The School of Education is one of the first schools of studies established in IGNOU in the year 1987 to plan, develop, and offer academic programs in education as a field of study and as an area of professional practice. The school presently offers 14 programs at various levels, include a program on postgraduate diploma in pre-primary education. And we are also in the process of developing a certificate or a diploma to cater to the needs of preschool level functionaries in collaboration with Ministry of Education, Government of India. The mission of the school is to develop programs with a multidisciplinary perspective while developing both disciplinary and professional programs. Presently, we are also offering a certificate program for professional development of Navodaya Vidyalaya Sangathan teachers. We are also revising our programs based on the recommendations of National Educational Policy 2020. With these few words, once again, I welcome all of you on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Venkateshwarlu. I now request my colleague, Professor Vandana Singh, to coordinate the program. Professor Vandana, please.
Thank you, Professor Sutapa Bose. For celebrating the National Education Day, today we have with us three experts. And let me introduce our first expert for the session, Professor Vinita Kaul. Professor Vinita Kaul is a professor emeritus in Ambedkar University, Delhi, where she retired in 2016 as a director, School of Education, and founder director of the Center for Early Childhood Education and Development. Prior to this, Professor Kaul was a senior education specialist in the World Bank after having served as professor and head of the Department of Preschool and Elementary Education at NCERT for over 20 years. Apart from this, she has been member of several committees to the Government of India in the advisory committee, and Professor Kaul has several national and international publications to her credit. With her rich experience, I am sure we will be enriched today. So I invite Professor Vinita Kaul to share her views on the theme pedagogic and curricular inputs for quality foundational stage education. Professor Vinita Kaul, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the warm welcome. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Essentially, I was told that we're going to be discussing the national curriculum framework that has recently come out for foundational stage. So I will just give you some sense of what my own understanding is of this whole foundational stage and what the curriculum framework is talking about and why it is saying what it is saying, as well as just take a bit of a critical look at the framework itself. To start with, I think that going back to the National Policy on Education 2020, I think that one of the very significant recommendations of that policy was the formulation of this foundational stage by combining the preschool stage in a curricular mode. So I think it is important for all of us to know that the integration of the preschool stage with the classes 1 and 2 was a curricular integration, not necessarily a physical integration, because the importance was realized that there has to be a continuity of the curriculum from pre-primary to primary. What was happening earlier was, and has still been happening because the policy has just come in, we have done researches across the country, and what we find is that instead of the preschool curriculum being what it is and there being an upward linkage with primary, it is the reverse that is happening, that there's a downward extension of the primary curriculum in the preschool stage. And as a result, children are being pressurized in the early years when they are just 3, 4, and 5-year-olds to actually learn academic skills for which they are not necessarily equipped because they're developmentally still maturing. So keeping this in mind, the policy has recommended that there should be a curricular integration, which means that there should be a continuity and along the continuity and consistency of the curriculum from the preschool stage to the primary stage, so that the children do not have any kind of a disruption in their experience and they find there is a seamless and smooth transition to the primary school. So this is there. In our own country, we have 4 different models of early childhood care and education, which I think people would know, but the policy is talking about it. We have the independent Anganwadi or the standalone Anganwadis, which are about 1.3 million Anganwadis across the country, which are run by the Ministry of and Departments of Women and Child Development at the state level. Then we have the Anganwadi, which is co-located with the primary schools, which is a more recent phenomenon, where there is much more physical proximity between the preschool and the primary. And then we have the private preschools, which are independent nursery schools. I think in every nook and corner of the country, we have those, which are run privately by people. And then we also have preschools attached to primary schools, primary classes in the preschools. So these are either private, which majority of the private schools are actually composite schools, as they have preschool onwards. But the government schools are largely, sorry, please forgive me, I've got a bad throat. The primary schools are, government primary schools are largely starting from class 1 conventionally, but there are many states where they have started the preschool class now. So the point to be made is, why has the need been realized by the national policy and subsequently by the national curriculum framework to have this curricular integration? I'm very happy to say that this is the first time that there has been an evidence-based recommendation that has come into the policy and into practice, hopefully, because there has been research around the world, and we in our own country, in Ambedkar University with Asar Center, we did longitudinal research for the first time. A research like this happened across. We did it from on children, 14,000 children from the age of 4 years. We identified them when they were 4 years old, and we continued to track them for 5 years. And we followed them up until they were in grade 3. And we looked at where they had gone, what was the quality of education they were getting, and what were the outcomes, how were the outcomes related to the quality of education that they were getting in these early years. And all this has been done in the context of the fact that today there is a lot of concern in India, as in many other developing countries as well, that children are coming into school, into primary schools. They are going through the rigors of the primary school, but moving into the upper primary even and not knowing the basics of reading and writing. So that has been the concern which the policy was addressing. And what we found in our research was that the children who had gone through a preschool, as opposed to those who had not gone through a preschool, did better in terms of their school readiness at the age of 5, and then subsequently when they went into the primary school. But that was not good enough, because later there was a certain tapering of their achievement levels. The best results were found when there was a continuity of the curriculum. Number one, that the curriculum at the preschool stage was a play-based curriculum, developmentally appropriate curriculum, and not an academic, rigorous, disciplined kind of a curriculum. And so this play-based curriculum, that was continued, if it was continued in situations where it was, into the primary grades as well, early primary classes 1 and 2, the results were not only the best, but they were also sustained. So the gains that were there from this were really sustained. And therefore the recommendation was made that it is very important, number one, to have a developmentally appropriate play-based pedagogy in the preschool level. And the same pedagogy should continue into classes 1 and 2, because children 6 to 8 year olds are also more or less, in terms of their developmental characteristics, more akin to the younger children than to the older ones. And they need the same kind of pedagogy and same kind of learning environment. And that is where this recommendation came in. Next point that I would like to talk about is this play-based pedagogy. Why is the play-based pedagogy, why was it found to be more effective? Of course, empirically we found that children who had experienced it were actually doing much better in school, and their learning levels were much better in language and maths, because that is what we tested. But more importantly, why is play so important? Because play is something that comes naturally to children, and play is the medium for children's learning. And all of us who know children know that left to themselves also every child plays. and they're able to create their own toys and their own environment. So if the learning that is planned for these children is rooted through a play-based environment and opportunities for play, which actually means giving children the agency to actually initiate activities which they're going to engage in, the learning activities. They should be of interest to them, and it should be in a very warm and supportive learning environment where the teacher plays a more facilitative role rather than the role of driving the learning activity. That kind of an environment is actually very, very conducive for children to learn well. And when we say what do children have to learn, so it is also important to know that this is, and this is all there in the National Curriculum Framework, that the learning should be directed in these early years towards children's promotion of their different developmental domains. And the 5 main domains that are there, which are actually language development and literacy, cognitive development and mathematics, early mathematics, early numeracy, but more importantly, socio-emotional learning and development, creativity and aesthetic appreciation, and physical and motor development. So these are the domains which together constitute the overall personality of a child. And the larger objective of early childhood education and now the foundational education is essentially to give children a very sound foundation for their education, for their learning, not only for school learning, but for life. So that is the primary objective. And the secondary objective is to prepare them for school. So the primary objective is what drives what the curriculum should be like. So the curriculum needs to be therefore such that incorporates the play-based pedagogy and aims at helping children develop their different domains. So that is what is very important. A third aspect of this curriculum is that it should be along the continuum, because the whole emphasis on bringing in the foundational stage and having the continuity with the primary classes is that the same pedagogy needs to go into upward continuity, not downward. And therefore, it is important that any state or any school which prepares the curriculum should start not from this primary and come down, but start from the preschool, the youngest level, that is a 3 to 4 year olds. So make a curriculum for the 3 to 4 year olds, and then based on that, continue for the 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, and 7 to 8. So it has to be in upward continuum. That is very, very important if you want to retain the spirit of this recommendation. Coming to the framework, the National Curriculum Framework, I think the important thing there is that they have actually emphasized this play-based pedagogy. There's a lot of text on it. A whole chapter is written on the play-based pedagogy. What does it mean? How children learn through stories, songs, activities, games, how important play is for children. It also talks about the important competence, but play is not just for play, but there are certain outcomes that are expected from this learning experiences of children. So the curriculum lists out a lot of competencies and which flow from the aims and objectives of foundational education, and gives a lot of detailed guidance to teachers. If you see, the curriculum framework is very different from the national curriculum frameworks of the past, which were more philosophical and more thought-provoking in nature, because they kind of they were more academic in approach also, and they were much shorter. I mean, this one is 300 odd pages, but the reason for that, I'm told, is that they wanted to make something which teachers could understand, because earlier there was a kind of a gap, communication gap, between what the curriculum frameworks were saying and what the practitioners were getting from it. So this is actually addressed to the teacher, and therefore it is goes into the details of how classroom practices have to be engaged with, how or designed, how the classroom organization has to be done, and how even assessment has to be done. And it goes into even giving examples of play-based pedagogy. It gives actual stories. It talks about different approaches, the thematic approach for curriculum, the story-based approach, and the project-based approach. Just a few issues I will say which are there in the curriculum framework, which I feel could need to be addressed or could have been addressed, which perhaps looking at it more critically. And with that, I will end. So essentially, one of the problems is the more attitudinal one. As I said earlier, that the issue which is very, very critical to this recommendation is that there has to be a continuity of pedagogy and curriculum from the preschool to the primary stage. Whereas here, what I find is that, for example, just to give a specific example, it says that there should be workbooks for children. There should be a lot of play materials in the pre-primary stage, but for class 1, there should be a textbook. Now, suddenly there is a disruption there because textbooks means formalization of the pedagogy, which is not desirable. And it should have been a continuity with the same approach of workbooks, activity books, along with the play materials for children. So somewhere it also brings in another element. The whole play-based pedagogy rests on two kinds of play, free play and guided play. So free play is where children get a lot of opportunity for open-ended creative play, particularly in activity corners, where children left to themselves as they play with the overall supervision from the teacher, but not any kind of direction from the teacher. Children are able to really develop their creative instincts, are able to get a lot of experiences. We talk a lot about the 5 C's today, the 21st century skills: creativity, cooperation, collaboration, critical thinking, and compassion. All these are actually addressed naturally through the play activities because children play with each other, they learn to collaborate, they learn to cooperate. All this happens through the free play method. And the other one is the guided play, where there are specific objectives for children's learning, because we are introducing, for example, I mentioned language and literacy. So where literacy comes in, or where numeracy comes in, then there need to be specific activities which are geared towards hand-holding children into learning the concept of numbers or learning to read and write. Now, those require more guided play, which means that the teacher has specific objectives and is able to create activities for children which are play-based, fun for children, but at the same time, they have a very clear objective. They are not open-ended. And child learns how to do certain tasks, which on completion of which child is able to develop the concept. So now there are these two kinds of plays, free and guided, and the combination of these, or a balance of these, is what makes an early childhood education program very meaningful. The curriculum framework has come up with a third dimension they call structured play. And I can see where the concern is coming from, because the people who have developed it are perhaps very insecure that we cannot leave the class 1 children to play. And so they have brought in this structure and made it into a textbook. And the whole approach, the sensitivity towards this whole pedagogy somehow gets compromised there, where it talks about a textbook very much on the pattern of what the textbooks have been, which will inevitably bring in more teacher-centered, syllabus-centered learning. So that is something that is really a concern for me. The second one is the issue of language. It has talked about, very rightly talked about the use of the mother tongue, or talked about whichever language most children are familiar with in the classroom should be the language of medium of instruction. I hesitate to even use the term instruction, because I think it should be medium of interaction, because the minute you say instruction, then it becomes a more teacher-centered curriculum. But it's rightly said that in the initial years, and one of the problems we have around the country, of course, there are many language groups which are not, their languages are not represented in the school system, which is a major issue. So they come into the classrooms without actually having the familiarity of language or the confidence to be able to interact. But also there's a large emphasis on, social emphasis on English medium. And majority of the children who come into the schools do not come with any familiarity with English, and therefore they also experience the same kind of a lacuna in the school, in the classrooms when they come. So it is very important, if we want children to get the best out of the play-based creative pedagogy, to be able to interact and engage with their own language, whichever they're familiar with. And then there needs to be, of course, in some cases, the need to have a transition to the another language. But the important thing is that there has the process needs to be clearly indicated of how this is going to be done. How are the children, if their own language cannot be the medium of instruction and there's a regional language which will be the medium of instruction, for instance, then how would they be hand-holded to move from one to the other? Or whether there should be any transition at all, or whether they should continue to be in the more bilingual, multilingual environment. So these are things, some of the aspects which are not really spelled out very clearly, which for the guidance of the teacher, which needs to be done. The curriculum framework has also brought in a new additional area, additional domain, which is positive learning habits. They've called it's a new domain altogether, which is not there in the early childhood education vocabulary at all. But I can see the merit of it because it is coming from what in the early childhood we talk about the executive functions, which have come from neuroscience, which talk about children's learning disposition, emotional regulation, the whole emphasis on cognitive flexibility. Many of these processes which are very critical for children's learning and which develop in these earliest years, which are the most critical, as we all know, for brain development. And these form the kind of a learning capability of a child which stays for life. And therefore, they are very important. Again, there is needs to be able to relate this to the play-based pedagogy, and what I feel is that this is more related to socio-emotional development of children and can very nicely be accommodated there, where children, through the play-based pedagogy, can actually pick up many of these if the environment is facilitated for learning of these. For example, emotional regulation, or even if you say cognitive flexibility, you don't need to have special tasks for it or special activities for it, but they need to be provided the environment and hand-holded to be able to develop these habits. And the last point I want to make is about the competencies, that it has given a very analytical kind of a chapter, the chapter 2 or 3, whichever is the one for competencies. It gives a framework which is very difficult, I think, for teachers to really understand the flow from aims to the actual competencies, because it goes through the objectives, through, I forget what are the different levels. And that is one fear, that if it was left broader, teachers would understand better what they are supposed to be doing. But the other thing is it goes into a very granular description of the sub-competencies in terms of what is what each in each domain, what is it that we need to look for. My fear is that the states, and I've seen this on the basis of my experience, that this is something similar to what was happening many years ago in terms of minimum levels of learning, where this whole wave had come about MLLs. And even the classroom, the textbooks had lessons with each lesson related to a competency. That's not how curriculum is. It's much more holistic. And every lesson, or whatever, every part of any experience, activity, or leads to multiple domains getting addressed. It's not just about one-to-one relationship. So it is likely to make, if it is taken in a very seriously from, in terms of a competency-based so-called curriculum, I hope that people, the curriculum makers in the decentralized modes, will not do a one-to-one correspondence of activity and objectives, and warp the whole structure of this curriculum. So I think these are some of the points that I would like to share, both in terms of the appreciation and critique of the National Curriculum Framework. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And that was your thoughts about the curriculum framework. They were quite insightful and we have gained a lot. And you very importantly flagged the important concern of education at the foundational stage, especially how the language should be used in the classroom interaction and how language plays an important role. You also emphasize very rightly the importance of play-based learning for the holistic development of the children at these stages. And of course, it is very, very important that this learning should happen in such a way that children, they seamlessly transit from preschools to the formal schools of learning. And that is the important concern. We have to take care of it. Thank you so much. I request you, ma'am, you please stay with us for the discussions as well. Thank you so much. Now I request my colleague, Dr. Poonam Bhushan, to please introduce the next expert for the session. No, you are not audible. Please unmute. Poonam, you are not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So thanks, Vandana. It's my privilege to introduce the speaker of the session, Dr. Deepa Sankar, Chief Education at the United Nations Children's Fund, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Formerly senior economist, the World Bank, Dr. Sankar has worked with prestigious organizations such as the World Bank, South Asia Human Development, National Institute of Public Finance, and Institute of Economic Growth. Among her areas of expertise are early childhood care and devising policy interventions for promotion of quality education. An alumnus of JNU and Kerala University, I now request Dr. Shankar to share her views on practices pertaining to quality early childhood. Dr. Shankar?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Sure. Yes, you are, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Poonam Bhushan. Good afternoon, everyone. For me, it is a great honor to be part of this panel. Professor Vinita Kaul has been my mentor and somebody who actually mentored me in education-related matters. I must confess that I'm not really an education specialist. I'm more of an economist, but had the great opportunity to work with eminent educationists, including Professor Vinita Kaul, and it is from her that I've learned a lot about early childhood education. So I'm really humbled and honored to actually be in the panel with her once again, and actually after what Professor Kaul has elaborated in her address, I feel all the more, how do I say, ill-equipped to talk on the subject. But given that as an economist and as somebody who is now managing education portfolio, including early childhood education in a few countries now, I feel it's also good to look at this issue also from the view of a non-educationist or somebody who comes from a different discipline. So basically, I would say that though I'm requested to make a presentation on practices, focus on practices in early childhood, early childhood education and curriculum or the foundational stage, I would rather say how I would look at it, not in terms of what happens in a preschool or in an education setup, but rather taking a view from outside the classroom, more at the system level, and what is it that we need to look at if we want to really implement the curriculum. So oftentimes what we see is in countries like India, we have great policies, great framework, and when you look at the curriculum or the pedagogy framework, the vision, I think India is way ahead of even some of the most developed countries. But then our main challenges is how do we translate into practices or programs and then see results. So if I really look at preschool education or early childhood education, I mean, now foundational skills, foundational learning has come to center stage, especially after Transforming Education Summit, which concluded in September 2022 in New York. A lot of focus is on foundational learning or foundational skills. And preschool education is an important component of that foundational literacy, foundational learning skills. So when I look at what is there in transforming education, that we need to really look at if we want to implement a national curriculum, or there is insistence on four major things. One is learning environment. How do we translate learning environment, whether it is in school or preschool, appropriate and encouraging for children to come and engage in, whether it is interaction with teachers or learning. So how do we provide them with a conducive learning environment? The Transforming Education Summit actually focused on this as an important area for government to look at. The second aspect the test talked about is teachers. How do we transform teachers so that they understand what is there in the curricular framework or vision, and then really enable children to achieve those developmental milestones, whether it is learning or skills. How do we really equip teachers to provide that kind of a learning to children? The third area which they talked about, and it may not have direct implication for ECE, is the digital learning. But at the same time, how digital divide during COVID-19 has affected differential learning for or differential experience for children in different strata, whether it is preschool education or primary education. We may have to look at in some point, how do we really give that, and given the increasing exposure of children to digital, public goods, we need to really look at how do we ensure that the curriculum also sort of enables children to do the right way of, or parents to look at things in the right way of using digital solutions. And the most important point, Transforming Education Summit focused is on investing more and investing effectively in education, including preschool education. I think these four areas are relevant when we talk about foundational stage, and how do we really look at what we do. I mean, for implementing the new curriculum. And within this, what I also feel is, I mean, like if you look at India, we have around, I think, more than 100 million children in the age group of 3 to 6 years who is eligible to be in preschool education. My understanding, given, I mean, I've been out of the country for more than a decade, but my understanding, given the data of available data, is that there are around, 4 out of 5 children are attending one form or other of preschool education or EC in the country. More than half of them, I think, is attending private sector, and the rest is mainly attending pre-primary along with primary schools or Anganwadi centers. So this is where we are. But given that last couple of years, education was disrupted, and India there are different experiences of, I mean, children in different parts of the country had differential experiences, both in terms of primary and pre-primary, in terms of access to, say, digital learning or even any learning solutions. So even for preschool education, I mean, one of the things we see is in many countries, we see children who were expected to go through 1 year preschool as per Sustainable Development Goal 4.2. Many children were, one of the indicators is that children go through at least 1 year of pre-primary education before they enter school. But in most countries, what we have seen is many children have not gone through any preschool education, and also due to automatic promotion, which the government rightly adapted, many children have reached even grade 2 or 3 without going through that experience of school readiness. So in this context, we also need to look at the global framework, RAPID, which is about reach out to the child, assess the situation, prioritize fundamentals, increase the scale and efficiency of services, and then develop psychosocial support. This is what the UN system and other development partners coined as a rapid framework for ensuring that children are provided with, or there are no learning loss or learning recovery or catch-up programs. So this rapid approach is what is also needed in preschool education, which is mainly about how do we ensure that those children who didn't go through preschool education in the last few years, or those who are out of any EC care system, how do we reach out to them? And also currently, many children are not in any preschool education or EC system. So how do we reach out to those children who is out who is out of the system as of now? And we need to assess the situation. I think this framework gives the right opportunity for us to assess the situation, because again, one of the challenges in a huge country like India is how different, I mean, the perception of the community about what is desirable at preschool level and what actually happens, and what is actually good for them. For example, Professor Cole has been emphasizing on the importance of play-based learning, and play-based learning as a means to impart the soft skills like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, communication, socialization, etc. But then a lot of parental understanding and parental expectations of a preschool is basically preparing children to something more of a literacy, numeracy learning rather than play-based understanding. So how do we bridge this gap between uh, parental expectations and what is more appropriate and desirable? So there is this opportunity to assess the situation. And then I think as the framework itself talks about foundational stage. So here is an opportunity with this curriculum to prioritize the fundamentals. And then the issue is, how do we really scale it up? Right now, it is at a conceptual stage. It has come out. The challenge is, how do national level, there is a lot of discussions. There is given the concentration of a lot of great minds in Delhi, and also institutions which look at it appropriately. There is a lot of deliberations on this. However, when we go down to many states, do they have this shared understanding of how to scale up the curriculum? How do they adapt this curriculum? So oftentimes we talk about India as one homogeneous country, whereas it is like it's so diverse that we really need to get these ideas down to the at least the district and sub-district level, to penetrate down to the Anganwadis or any preschool situations. So increase the scaling up, or the effective scale up, uh, is an important thing. And we need to really say that we just not scale up preschool education, we scale up the appropriate, and this new great vision scale up needs to happen. So for that, I think a lot of uh, collaboration with the states is important. And of course, there has been a lot of talk about developing psychosocial support for children, and preschool is the right place for actually providing that to them. So having the test vision as well as the rapid framework, what are the things I would like to see in terms of rolling out this new curriculum, or the strengthening the foundational stage and support for that? I would like to talk about 4 or 5 main areas. One is the policies. I already mentioned that in India, education is a subject in the concurrent list of the Constitution, which means while at the national level we can develop a curriculum, or we can also develop policies. At the end of the day, states, what are states' vision? Do they have the same vision? how do states really make use of these national level framework, whether they understand what is seen in these things, uh, because each state have their own kind of ideas of implementing things. So somewhere we need to really see whether these policies have some unique and common thread at the state level, or are they really disconnected from national vision and what is important. In terms of service delivery, India is a country where we have all kinds of provision from Anganwadi to private sector. But I think it is also important to have some kind of uh, sorry, some kind of I mean, I won't say standardization. We need contextualization, but at the same time, what I meant is some regulation to ensure that. Uh, I mean, we have large private sector. They do also understand the curriculum in the right way, and they don't really promote uh, things which are not desirable. So somewhere at the service delivery part, we need to ensure that they follow the curriculum and vision at which is brought out by this beautiful document. Uh, I think it is, I mean, I don't need to elaborate, but again, I know it is what India spends on preschool education or ECD is 0.1% of GDP, and it is like 0.39% of national budget. Uh, Oftentimes people blame the central government, but I think we also need to look at state governments, because ECD is also a subject in the state list. I mean, a concurrent list with state as a major provider. We need to really have a strong advocacy at state level. I think we need to persuade them to spend more. I mean, invest more, invest effectively. States should invest according to their capacity, and they should have more commitment. I think this is one missing point when we talk about investing in education. Often we only look at the national budget, but we need to really get even the states like Punjab, who is supposed to be a richer state compared to Bihar. Uh, but some of these richer states are the ones who spend least out of, if you look at their capacity to invest, they spent least in education, and particularly ECD. So I think we need to have a differentiated approach, but we need to go beyond national to the state level in terms of persuading them to finance preschool education. And uh, uh, another issue is at the governance level. I still don't have much information about national level, where we have EMIS to collect all data from private preschool education, or private preschools, or Anganwadis. I mean, I think Anganwadis, definitely we have some data, but given that more than half of the children are in private kindergartens or preschools, how do we collect data? Because at the end of, and how do we really monitor what is happening within those classes? So I think it is very important to also look at data and the analysis of that. And and one final point I would again emphasize is the parental involvement. I think the last study was the UNICEF, which was led by Professor Vinita Kaul, on the early childhood development continuum. I mean, in India, but at the same time, we don't. I mean, India unfortunately do not have multi-indicator cluster survey or similar surveys. So oftentimes we don't have enough space to understand how young children are getting the attention of fathers or other members. Oftentimes, I mean, even in India, some of the studies show that more than half of the men consider child care as something to do with the women and the mothers, or the other female in the house. I did a study in Uzbekistan. I mean, we did a study in Uzbekistan, which clearly says that only 4% of the fathers are ever even involved with a preschool child, which was again confirmed by uh, mix, which was done in 2022, again highlights that fathers' engagement with childcare is just below 5%. This is an area we need to really look at, because all this beautiful curriculum, uh, through the curriculum we are focusing on classrooms, but I think it also looks at the house, support from family. And this is an area, I don't know, I don't have the latest figures regarding India in this, but I think this is an area to look at. And I think we need to really do a lot of communication and advocacy for ensuring all types of parents, I mean, men or women, are engaged in supporting, the translation of this new curriculum framework, not only from the school or preschool perspective, but also from the demand side, from the family perspective. So basically, these are the points I thought I'll highlight. I'm here more to learn. I've learned a lot from Professor Cole's deliberations on this topic, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Professor Manikarnika Dey on more on her perspectives. Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks a lot. I'll finish it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sankar, for that very interesting and insightful talk. I'll just try to sum it up a little bit. I think the fact that you said that you'll bring to the table the non-educationist perspective and outside the classroom perspective does give the presentation different other aspects which one needs to consider while developing the curriculum for early childhood education. I think basically the fact that you highlighted was this, that we are very good as a nation in developing and charting and framing the policies, but the challenge always remains at the point of implementation. 4 important things which you have highlighted in the context of transforming education summit 2020 remain as learning. The environment for learning has to be very conducive at that stage. The second thing is about the teachers should know what is expected of them, what are they required to do. Thirdly, the digital learning experience in the wake of the COVID has taught us that there are differential strata of population which have exposure to digital learning. So one has to be very sensitive also to that aspect. And the fourth aspect was about investing more and investing efficiently. Let me just go on to the other points which I have noted down. I think basically you also highlighted the fact that the new national education framework is a nice document, and it also gives us opportunities to kind of resolve certain pending issues. At the same time, there are more challenges which one needs to take into account. Amongst the aspects which need to be worked on is one very important aspect, which is about the perceptions of the community with regard to the age-specific population which needs to go for early childhood care to schools and so on, preschools. And the second is about methods of learning, how play-based learning is almost reduced to no learning as far as the parents are concerned. I think another very important dimension which came out was in the context of of education being on the concurrent list, what challenges does it throw up? At the same time, juxtaposing the center's role. Do we actually have should we have a centralized role? If we need to scale up, how should we scale up? We need to scale up the vision. We need also to be cognizant of the challenges. At the same time, I think budget allocation for education remains a perennial problem that we have to grapple with. And I think finally, I would like to say that the private sector in early childhood care remains unregulated by and large. There's no data coming out from there. We have no idea about what is being taught, who's teaching, and so on and so on. So these probably would comprise the challenges that we have to consider very minutely. Thank you once again, and I would like to request the audience that whoever wants to interact with Dr. Sankar, there is time towards the end of the session after the third speaker also has presented her views. So probably we can hold on till then. So thanks once again, Dr. Sankar, very much for that very thought-provoking and interesting presentation. Thank you. Dr. Aisha, may I now request you to take over from here, take it further with introducing the third speaker for the session.
Thank you, Poonam. It's my pleasure now to introduce the third speaker, Dr. Manimalika Dey. Dr. Manimalika Dey is Director, Center for Early Childhood Education and Development at the School of Education Studies, Ambedkar University, Delhi. Dr. Dey completed her PhD in Special Education from the University of Maryland, USA. Prior to joining the Ambedkar University, Delhi, she was a faculty at George Mason University, USA. She has provided training and technical assistance to various early childhood programs in the USA during her work with the Center for Program Excellence at 0 to 3. She has been involved in several research projects to improve developmental outcomes of young children from marginalized communities through parenting programs and preschool education. She has provided technical assistance to the states of Bihar, Meghalaya, and West Bengal in partnership with the UNICEF and the World Bank through the Center for Early Childhood Education and Development. In fact, Dr. Dey has steadfastly nursed her interest in early childhood education and development since her Jadavpur days. In fact, she began her career in Kolkata at Calcutta Rescue and notably founded the Drop-In Center for Homeless Children, where they had 300 children in the year 1989 at a very young age, probably when her contemporaries took the beaten linear path to career development and progression. Later, she taught at Manovika's Kendra and helped establish a hospital-based program for young children with disabilities before moving to the USA to pursue her studies. Her interest focuses on early stimulation, quality of early childhood programs, preschool education, inclusion of children with disabilities, teacher education, and collaboration between schools and families. She has authored 3 books. Her recently published book is by Stage Publication in the year 2022, which is titled Early Childhood Education for Marginalized Children in India, Deconstructing Quality. She has authored several chapters and has published in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Manimalika Dey, we are happy to have you with us, and we extend a warm welcome to you, the School of Education, Indira Gandhi National Open University. I now request Dr. Manimalika Dey to speak on the theme, Capacity Building for Implementation of Early Childhood Care and Education Curriculum Framework. Dr. Manimalika Dey, please.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Good afternoon to everyone. And I'm really very honored to be at this event. I would like permission to share my PowerPoint, if that's possible. So I hope everybody can see the PowerPoint and can also hear me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think, this is a really very extensive document, on the curriculum framework that has come up on the foundation years. And I have to say that I've only had an initial read. It's just been a few weeks, so I've really not had the opportunity to fully grasp all the content that has been presented. But one of the things that I feel again is that the vision that was put forth in the NEP 2020, it can only be realized if if we really are able to develop or enable teachers in the early childhood field to implement the curriculum. So this is why I decided to look at sort of, what are the sort of capacity building mechanisms that we currently have, and what are perhaps some changes that we need to think about in order to really implement this very aspirational vision, I would say. So if we look at NEP 2020, we find that they're talking about developing a framework for early childhood care and education for the 3 to 8-year-olds, but also a sub-framework for the birth to 3. And I really wanted to emphasize on that, given that, again, as Professor Kaul has already kind of talked about the need for continuity. So, what are sort of, what are the opportunities for the young birth to 3-year-olds to learn? What are they learning in the creches? How are parents interacting with them? All this is of great importance. If we kind of take a brief look at our field, it's really the field of ECC is a very complex area. And in our country, we've been debating regarding the age range, and rightly so, for quite a long time. So, this is really the field of ECC is an interdisciplinary team that requires collaboration, not just across agencies, but also across ministries in our country. So it's very, very important for the Ministry of Women and Child Development and for the Ministry of Education to come together in order to implement this vision. If we look at the programs that are there, we've kind of talked about the preschool programs. So largely, currently, again, it's the Anganwadis, which is where sort of, we have 13.3 lakh Anganwadis where children are getting their preschool education. So these are some of the realities that we need to consider as we move forward. In terms of the discussion on the age range, in the Right to Education Act of 2009, the 3 to 6 years was the preschool years were not included. But later on in the national ECC policy of the Ministry of Women and Child Development, we see that, early childhood was kind of defined as birth to 6 years. Now, in the national education policy, they are recognizing that early childhood is from birth to 8 years. But of course, as I said, there are two ministries which have to work together in order to, build quality programs in the field of early childhood education. So, now coming to sort of the teacher education institutions, and actually under the guidance of Professor Kaul, CSED and the NCT had done a very elaborate study across India, a survey of the teacher education institutions in early childhood in India. And what we find is that the majority of the teacher education institutions are located in the private sector. So not just the preschools are located in the private sector, but also the teacher education institutions are located in the private sector. Of the sample majority, that is almost 63.4 of them, did not have recognition from NCTE for various reasons, but that was the situation. And secondly, 40% of the teacher educators did not have the required qualifications to teach early childhood in the preschool sections. So a few things to think about as we think about moving ahead and creating a workforce that is well trained. we find that many of the educators in the private sector or many of the Anganwadi workers may or may not have post-secondary credentials. So one of the important questions that we need to grapple with is how do we plan to support the existing teachers and Anganwadi workers to transition and acquire the necessary qualification. States also need to create a cadre of teachers, a dedicated cadre of teachers for the foundational stage, which is kind of not there currently. Educators face also, the current educators, even if they want to pursue, and go for training, there are various systemic barriers in terms of their ability to go for their training. So these are all important, important barriers that we need to consider in terms of creating a quality in the field of early childhood education. And finally, that there is actually no demand for training, if we think about it, because there is no accreditation process for early childhood programs. And therefore, as we know that there is great variety in the kind of programs that are available out there. And there is really no incentive for the teachers to go and get their credentials. So training in early childhood education, again, we see sort of, quite a variety over there. If we look at the CSET report, it talked about the Anganwadi workers training, which now is being done online. There's the integrated pre-primary and primary teachers training. Then there's the nursery pre-primary teachers training, and also the diploma, the one-year diploma that is there, which I believe also IGNOU has a one-year diploma. In the higher education institutes, we have the DLED, the BLED, BEd, and also undergraduate as well as postgraduate diplomas. And we have certificates according to the report from CSET and NCT. The certificates vary all the way from 1-month certificates to 6-month certificates. So we find that there is great variation in terms of the teacher training, teacher training programs that are currently out there. So in the curriculum framework, one of the major recommendations that have been made is that all teachers for the foundation years should have the ITEP degree, that is the integrated teacher education program. And secondly, the teacher, that they should all be appearing for or clear the teacher eligibility test, the TET. So these are welcome changes on the one hand in terms of considering creating of a professional workforce. So professionalization of the early childhood education field has been a problem. And for the longest time, the early childhood educators are not even considered to be teachers. The construct of early childhood educator, that itself needs a lot of redefining as we kind of move. And there has to be like a paradigm shift in how we conceptualize the teacher. So this is also complex because the nature of work that an early childhood educator does is very different from the other teachers in the other stages. And Professor Kaul has talked about that we worry about even using the word teaching, and rightly so, because the educator at this stage really needs to be equipped or to know how to facilitate learning, and less to stand up and do any kind of lecture or teaching. So if we look at the various areas that have been identified in the in-service teacher education component, we find there's global research, understanding content, curricular goals, pedagogy, content, and material assessment, it's very important it's very good that assessment has been highlighted here. One of my concerns is that it highlights only children, it only talks about the children at risk. That is, teachers need to have the skills and the knowledge in order to identify children who may have disability. Now, the issue is that but if we look at the vision that has been put forward in the NEP 2020, we are talking about creating inclusive classrooms. So it's not enough for teachers to just know about how to identify children at risk. They really need to know about how to include children with disabilities in the classroom. So that is, and this is rather complex because it requires, as I said upfront, that early childhood demands a lot of collaboration, and this is one area where the teacher alone cannot work. The teacher has to work with various therapists, including the special educator. Moreover, in the in-service section, it has been recommended that that the mentoring and support to the school teachers will be provided by SCRT, diet, bites, and BRCs and CRCs. And here my concern is that, unfortunately, in many of these institutions, currently there is a lack of expertise in ECE. And we kind of experienced it firsthand when the states were asked to create the curriculum framework for each of the states. I think many of the states, to the best of my knowledge, struggled with finding appropriate experts to help them work on this. Another very welcome sort of change is that it talks about the career ladder, and that the teachers need to have a career opportunity, that they can go up the different career ladder, and they will be linked to both their salary as well as promotions, so that they are retained in the same stage. And this, I felt, was a really important aspect in terms of professionalization of the field, because as we know that for a long time they have not been given that status. In order to move towards this, I feel one of the important steps that needs to be taken is the process of accreditation. So, again, we have a huge number of schools in the private sector. We have a lot of Anganwadis, but we don't have a unified accreditation system. And without that, I think it's very difficult for us to expect that quality services will be provided to the young children. Secondly, there is a need to develop a national accreditation for early childhood teacher preparation programs as well. So, which I think, after the curriculum framework has been developed, and NCT is expected to kind of develop that framework. However, I also feel that, there needs to be state accreditations need to be considered as well, because there is great diversity in the Indian context. And I think, again, because sort of education is both a national and a state subject, it's important for the states to have, to have their voice in trying to figure out what are the qualities or what are the skills, disposition, and knowledge that they would like to prioritize in their state. So, and state approval for continuing professional development and training programs. So, so there needs to be approval not just for the pre-service programs, but also as we think of the continuation in the in-service programs. In terms of inclusion of young children with disabilities, I think, and it is difficult for me not to focus on this because, I've worked in this area for a long time. So a couple of things, how is disability conceptualized? And interestingly, in the current framework, although in NEP they're talking about inclusive education, in the current framework, when they're giving examples of what a teacher needs to do, the examples focus on providing or developing individual activities for the child or children with disabilities. But that's not how inclusion happens. What we need to consider is what are the activities that are happening in the classroom, and then we need to juxtapose that with what are the needs and what are the goals of the child who has any kind of disability. So we need to bring the two together in terms of thinking about curriculum modification. And some of the things that we need to consider in inclusive education is, first of all, again, here as well, we need to think about a paradigm shift, that is from thinking about disability as an individual phenomena, moving to the disability as a social phenomena, which I think many of our policy documents have moved in that direction. We also need a unified again, special education teachers are taught to work with children with disabilities. The regular teachers are taught to work only with children who do not have any identified disabilities. So there's really a gap in terms of how the two professionals come together and work together to create inclusive environment. And that requires a blended approach. So we need to perhaps even think about, having some model demonstration programs. We need to do some experimentation in these areas in order to develop these programs. So in the norms and NCT norms and standards for ITEP, it integrates everything to empower teachers and help them to do their jobs as effectively as possible. And in addition to the integration of disciplines and professional knowledge, cater to the requirement to recruit the best and brightest of the teaching professionals at all levels. So that, again, I felt was an important sort of a statement in terms of the professionalization of the field. Now, in terms of the ITEP program, as I said, currently the situation is that a lot of the teachers who are currently teaching in early childhood education do not have a bachelor's degree or do not even have any post-secondary diplomas or certificates. So here, I think this is where the distance learning can really play a critical role in terms of training the teachers at scale in order to create a qualified, well-qualified workforce. So this is where sort of I also feel, again, in terms of NCTE, currently they are focused on identifying or certifying these three kinds of early childhood programs: the diploma program in preschool education, the diploma in elementary education, and the bachelor's of elementary education. And also, as soon as the ITEP program is launched, of course, that is something that will be governed by the NCTA. Sorry. So here again, what I feel is that also other ways of providing teachers or training the teachers have been talked about in the NEP 2020. So the DTH channels have been mentioned, for example, in the NEP 2020. So one needs to think about how do we bring in the different approaches, a multiple approach in order to create a strong cadre of well-qualified early childhood educators. So specifically in the open and distance learning, I think it'll be useful if we can experiment and create flexible multi-mode programs in early childhood care and education. We also need to think about some of the regional centers which may connect with or develop links with the NCT accredited institutions. And also there needs to be perhaps greater collaboration between the national as well as the regional centers. So in order for this to happen, I think, as it has been identified in the document itself, that NCT perhaps needs to do a very, a large scale survey or needs assessment of the teachers who are currently, of the situation across India in terms of, what is the nature of qualification, what is the institutions that are available, what are the quality of teacher educators that are there. As I said, there is a shortage of expertise in early childhood currently. So how do we address these? So we do need to have a very elaborate needs assessment done, which can be then followed by developing a unified framework for ECC teachers training. And what I mean by a unified framework is a framework that takes into consideration the various stages in the early childhood. It also takes into consideration the convergence across ministries. It also needs to take into consideration the coming together of special education and early childhood education for inclusive education to happen. So there really needs to be a comprehensive framework developed for this. It needs to indicate also the levels of the program. Currently it's not very clear. Let's say if a student wants to seek further training in early childhood education, it is not clear to them what is introductory, what is the intermediate, and what is an advanced level. What is the career trajectory? So those things need to be spelled out very clearly. And at each level sort of articulate, what is the depth and the breadth of the content areas in the core subjects. Regarding the levels, that needs to be developed, again, that needs to be aligned with the national skill qualification framework, so that, it's the, their training is kind of connected with their employability. It's clearly connected to their employability. And this is where, again, I feel that the choice-based credit system is also an important component, which we need to further strengthen and explore further as we create this framework to allow for flexibility as well as opportunities for the teachers in early childhood to move forward in their curricula. So finally, I want to say that I think currently, we need to take stock of the situation that is there at the ground level, begin with some kind of a needs assessment based on the vision that we have created, and then develop a strategy for it. And without the roadmap, I just worry that that such a lofty vision, such a very ambitious vision may just fall flat. So that is my, so with that, I will end my session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Day. Dr. Day, when you said NEP 2020 can be realized only through capacity building of teachers, one couldn't agree with you more. Let me just quickly say a few points in summary of what we have presented. You rightly pointed out the need for collaboration between different ministries, not only among different educational agencies. Usually when we hear about education, we discuss about education, we only think about Ministry of Education. But as you said, it should cut across different ministries, especially Women and Child Development Ministry. That's all. So another point which you highlighted was it's not enough to say we should take care of children at risk, but teachers must know how to do that. So highlighting the significance of teacher training programs. Presently, you said there is a lack of expertise in ECE in education systems. So one of the needs is to build that capacity. You also highlighted the importance of career development of educationists who are in the ECE education system. Because usually when policy is developed, such a thing is not paid much attention to. Another point you highlighted was that the importance of uniform accreditation for pre-service as well as in-service teacher training programs. You also brought in the point of how to train the teacher force in the country in early childhood area. So therefore you mentioned the ODL system and the need for developing a comprehensive and unified framework for ECE for teacher training. Overall, you have given a very comprehensive understanding of the capacity building for implementation of ECE curriculum framework. Dr. Day, we thank you for such a comprehensive presentation, which was very enriching to all of us, which took us through a critique of the NEP 2020, as well as you made many suggestions how we can achieve or realize the capacity building through different actions that can be taken. I now open the session for questions, observations, and discussion. You can ask your questions. Ajit, do you have a question?
Thank you, Aisha ma'am. Actually, we have one question in the chat box. This is to Professor Vinita ma'am. Let me read out the question. I think Professor Vinita ma'am is hearing that. The question is how implementation of play-based pedagogy as suggested in current NCF could be facilitated in rural India. Let me repeat, how implementation of play-based pedagogy as suggested in current NCF could be facilitated in rural India. Professor Vinita ma'am, if you could.
Yes, thank you. That's a very interesting question. Actually, perhaps it is coming from this sense that play-based pedagogy means very expensive toys and equipments and the classroom and a very urbanized environment. Actually, play-based pedagogy is more about processes and materials. Definitely materials are needed, but for children, we know that they can make a toy out of anything. You see a small child will take a stick or even a kind of a stone and make it into a ball or a horse or a plane or aeroplane or whatever. So there's a lot of imaginative play that happens with children, but there's also a lot of local material that is available in the anywhere, with pebbles, with leaves, with any kind of even environmental materials available. There are lots of activities that can be done. So essentially, as I said, it is more about processes. It is not so much about equipments and materials, because even locally procured materials can be there, but there is need for a kit, which ICDS, for example, already gives. So that kit can be something that is contextualized, but it has actually play materials for activity corners. And these corners are like, you could have a picture books corner, you could have a storybooks corner, you could have a blocks corner, you can have a dolls corner, or you can have a art corner for creative art. Now, for all these, there can be contextualized materials made available, storybooks for children, which have to be made available, and they're not to be procured locally. Essentially, what is very important is how do we create play-based pedagogy in a rural setup is, wherever we do it, whether it is rural or urban, the training of the Anganwadi workers or the training of the teachers has to be very demonstration and practice-based. Unfortunately, if we only use through simulation or through lectures, that will not going to have any impact, because they have to see to believe. And not only see to believe, but also see how it is being done in the classroom, but see the impact it is having on children. That is the most convincing part of any kind of a training. And therefore, I'm saying it on the basis of my experience, that the training has to be very much contextualized in the setup in which the teacher is. For example, if it is in a rural Anganwadi, then the training needs to be done in that Anganwadi. And it has to be done with the children who are going to be coming to her, and how they're going to be organized in such a way. What are the processes? What is the teacher's role? What is the children's role? All those have to be demonstrated. And the best training that can happen is if we are able to make it practice-based, practice leading to reflection rather than teaching leading to practice, because practice-based reflection is the best modality for internalizing the concepts of the pedagogy.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay,
Vinita,
excuse me. I had a question regarding that children's thinking and understanding. They are always a challenge to access because their language is still in development. So in such context, how teacher as an adult educator can intervene or can access children's thinking and understanding? This question I want to ask to Professor Vinita Kaul, madam.
Children manifest their thinking and their, what was the other thing you said? Thinking and
understanding.
And understand. They manifest through their actions, through the choices they make, through what they are showing through their practical behavior. So when we are saying, okay, how do we access the thinking, we can understand the thinking only to the extent that they are manifesting it through their, as I said, the choices they are making. For example, if the child is playing with a doll and the child is talking about, slapping the doll or saying that, you must sit straight, you must not do this, you must do that. Somewhere we can infer from that the child is experiencing some tensions as a result of this kind of behavior happening somewhere where the child is, whether it's at home or the teacher. And that is what is bothering the child. So one has to draw inferences from what the child is actually doing, as the behavior of the child, or the way the child is reflecting it in the play situation. Play is a very good manifestation of that. The other thing is that we need to also, the teacher's role has to be very supportive and facilitative, for which, for example, if children are playing, the teacher doesn't say this is right, this is wrong, but the teacher has to help them, handhold them towards what could be the right answer. So it's more about demonstrating, more about engaging them, helping to extend their thinking, rather than actually looking at it in a more kind of, what should I say, formal manner. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. One more question,
Uh,
ma'am. Stated about two types of play, free play and guided play. So in such cases, how we can assess children's free play? Because assessment part is not much elaborated. How children's free play can be assessed?
See, assessment has to be done in terms of indicators, right? Now, indicators for free play, for example, if you talk about free play, the indicators link to the different domains of development. So you have the social development, you have the cognitive development, creative development, you have physical and motor development, and you have language and literacy development. Now, when you are saying how do we assess the way, is the child playing, first of all? Does the child, if a child is malnourished, for instance, we have a huge problem of malnourishment in our country. Children are not active, they're not alert, they are not engaging because they don't have the energy. So an important consideration is the child engaging with activity? Second is how the child is engaging. What is the kind of behavior the child is manifesting as the child is engaging? I've just given you the example of the doll's corner. The third thing is that how is a child playing with other children or not? Has a child, because this is the stage when the children are learning to share, learning to cooperate, learning to collaborate and work with other children. And therefore, is the child engaging enough with other children, or the child playing only in isolation? If that is so, for example, then the teacher needs to just help the child start playing with others as well. Put the child in situations where the child plays what is known as cooperative play, where they work together. So these are kind of situations that the teacher has to be trained in. That how is she going to respond to, not how she's going to drive the child towards any learning objectives, but how she's going to respond to the children's behavior. What are the indicators? How does she handhold them to be able to help them develop fully in terms of their all-round development?
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Niradhar Dey.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aisha Madam. I have a generic question to Monica Dey Madam. Madam, what you have experienced from NCF 2005, National Curriculum Framework 2005, then after National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education 2009, and even if National Knowledge Commission in 2009, and further the recent development, that is NEP 2020, National Education Policy 2020. When we talk about curriculum, it may be for the pre-primary education or for the middle or preparatory stage of school education. Our curriculum, it provides two types of experiences to the learners. One is the core areas of knowledge, core subject areas of knowledge, and other is the, as per NCF 2005, this has mentioned that other areas of knowledge, just like peace education, work education, health education, art and craft education, yoga education, which is more or less part of life skill education. You see, in the policies, this has been properly mentioned that it should be rightly addressed in the curriculum, not only in the curriculum, it should be properly practiced, implemented in the school system also. But the experience is something different because I don't know whether it is the perception of the teachers or the parents that very much we are focused upon the core areas of knowledge, the subject areas of knowledge, that may be the mathematics, science, social science, or different languages. Now it is high time to address these other areas of knowledge in our curriculum. Could you please give your insight that how can you better address these other areas of knowledge in the curriculum, especially in the preschool curriculum? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very, very important question, and something I think we've been struggling with in the field of education for a long time. And I feel actually the answers perhaps can emerge better if we look at how a well-balanced curriculum is implemented at the early childhood level. That's where I think, if we can, because in the early childhood curriculum, we do focus on holistic development. That is a major focus. Unlike in the senior years where we tend to kind of narrow down to cognitive areas, etc. And I think, again, it's problematic in a couple of ways. Also, we need to think about what is our conceptualization of the learner, our imagination of the learner. And, are we sort of following this tradition of just imparting knowledge, Or is this a person who has many qualities of strengths and needs, and the school environment or the education environment provides that opportunity for self-discovery? I think, again, if we look at the various educationists, in the Indian context, they've looked at education as a means of self-discovery. If we look at, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, I think that gives us a great framework to understand both sort of, the learner in and the many facets of their learning. And are we addressing all of those areas? So if we are maintaining a balance of considering all those 8 areas, I think that will kind of help us to move forward. So, because when a child is learning numbers, they're not just learning numbers just by counting, but when they're walking down the steps, they might be counting the steps. So, are we considering that? So, we tend to fragment learning, and that the fragmentation of the learner, I think, is a very important, problem in education.
Okay,
I'm
thank you,
sorry
madam.
to announce that we are short of time. So therefore, we will move on to the next session. I know that, we had 3 excellent speakers, very thought-provoking presentation they made. So therefore, many would like to interact with them. However, due to shortage of time, we are moving on to the next part of our program. So I request Professor Suttappa to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. The discussions centered around the NEP's recommendation for universalization of preschool education. I now request Honorable Vice Chancellor, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Professor Nageshwar Rao, to deliver the presidential address. Sir, please.
Sir, unmute, sir. To mark the birth anniversary, is it audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir. You're
sir.
right. To mark the birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, 3 distinguished speakers, they have been invited, and they talked about the basic issues confronting the higher education system as well as the secondary education system, affecting our country in the light of the national education policy. Professor Vinita Kaul, Ms. Deepa Shankar, Dr. Moni Malika Day. All the 3 distinguished speakers, they spoke on 3 different themes. Dr. Day spoke on the early childhood care. Queries are also raised, some observations they were also being put by the distinguished members of the school present. And now the school might be enriched with the inputs which they have received from these 3 distinguished scholars. National education policy, it is now being implemented all over the country and widely accepted, and it gives us lots of opportunities to see that how we can restructure our entire education system
to make it more learner-centric, to make it more learner-friendly. The structural changes that have been also been suggested, along with the skill component, and also the flexibility of the learners that is also being taken into account. IGNOU is already taking a lead to implement the awareness and implementation training program for all the faculty members of the country, numbering around 15 lakhs, and for which the ministry has already sent a letter to all the chief secretaries in different states. And large number of teachers, they are registering on the portal. Again, that portal is of ministry, the Samarth portal. The contents, they are uploaded on the Swayam platform, and the delivery, it is being done through Swayam Prabha channel. 5 batches, they have been admitted, and the training program is completed for them also. It is a process wherein the evaluation is also being done, and certification is automatically being generated, and it is being received by the participants. Around 20,000 teachers, they are now getting at least the basics of NEP, and also the areas of concern where we can see that how it can be used further to improve our educational structure, educational processes, and also the outcomes of our educational system. And all the distinguished speakers, they have made an attempt to link their views with the implementation of the national education policy. Because School of Education always tells the future course of action, especially in the field of education. And in our university, the School of Education is also guiding all of us to implement this outcome-based education, multidisciplinary focus of education, skill components that we added, the credit transfer mechanism, implementation of the Academic Bank of Credit, and all those areas, the mechanisms, the processes, they're being looked into by the distinguished faculty members of the School of Education. And we know that how to reach the unreached, how to provide quality education to the learners. Now, the ODL education system and the online education system, they are being used interchangeably. And that is why in 2020, the regulations which have come up, in that both the earlier regulations, they have been clubbed together. ODL regulations of 17 and ODL regulations of 18. And most of the processes now, even in the ODL also, they have become online. And COVID has further forced all of us to review our delivery mechanism. And that is why we are using the technology, the technological interventions, to speed up the process of implementation with respect to the revision of courses, developing new courses, and the focus is now shifted towards the learners. we are now making sincere efforts to see that how the interests of the learners that can be protected by using the technological interventions and also the structural changes. Of course, this university, it has got the distinction of providing quality education by introducing lots of structural interventions. Flexibility is the key, and that has paved the way to meet most of the requirements of learners. And today, when we see that most of our fundamentals, they are now incorporated in the national education policy, we feel happier, we feel much more comfortable, and we also feel that we are in a better position to implement most of the fundamentals of national education policy in our entire education system. And we are getting good results out of that. Today is the National Education Day. Opportunity gives us to think about our educational systems, structures, and interventions, and the possibilities of making changes in that can also be evolved. Our think tank, the School of Education, is constantly looking into this area and making a sincere effort to suggest the areas in which the university can further strengthen their learner-friendly framework. I am really thankful to all the three distinguished speakers who spared time for us, given lots of insights to all of us. And maybe I know that the school might have recorded their talks, and the same can further be used for strengthening our teaching learning process and also in the implementation of the national education policy. The school can further discuss and deliberate the issues which have been raised by the distinguished speakers and see that how we can use most of them in our open and distance learning education system of this university. I sincerely thank all the three distinguished speakers and also compliment the School of Education who has taken this initiative to have the talk from these three distinguished speakers today on the eve of the National Education Day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Professor Mishra to deliver the vote of thanks. Professor Mishra.
I think before vote of thanks, I think we have Professor Satyakam sir with us. Sir, if you can say a few words.
Thank you, but after the presidential address of Honorable Vice Chancellor, I wanted to say that congratulations for the day, and what Sir told us that School of Education is a think tank, and we together have to proceed further to take this university to the high sky. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The esteemed attendees of this virtual event, we'd like to greet you all on behalf of School of Education, IGNOU, on celebration of National Education Day to commemorate birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, the first education minister of independent India. During this celebration, we have been critically examining the curricular and pedagogical framework for early childhood care and education, with excellent inputs from three eminent speakers, Professor Vinita Kaul, Ms. Deepa Shankar, and Dr. Moni Molika De. The efforts of speakers were extraordinary and helped immensely in appreciating national curriculum framework for foundation stage and its critics. The points those were emphasized: developmentally appropriate and play-based curriculum and pedagogy, rapid framework and approaches for preschool education, and strategies for holistic and inclusive preschool education, and many other important issues. Our gratitude to Professor Nageswara Rao, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, who has been our guiding lamp for the School of Education. Your guidance to school in implementing NAP 2020 is excellent over the recent years. We ensure you that, sir, we would keep trying to do the best. We are also extremely thankful to Professor Satyakam, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of the University, who has been with us in this virtual event. We are thankful to all directors of School of Studies of the University, directors of divisions and centers and the units, academics from regional centers, and our learners from various places who have been watching it streaming through different other modalities. This is to put in record the efforts made by the program coordinators, Professor Bandana, Professor Sutapa, and the mentorship by Dr. Professor D. Venkateswarulu, in charge director of the school, and also Professor C.B. Sharma, director of the school, who is on leave. Thanks to all faculty members, staff members, and the students. Let us stand up for the national anthem. Thank you.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
So with this, the event is closed now.